All right. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Brian Daniel, he, him pronouns, and I currently serve as the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Residence Life at Mars Hill University. It's a small private liberal arts institution located in Western North Carolina, so just above Asheville, where we will all be next year. So wanted to share a little bit about this topic and talk a little bit more about my connection to this. But before I get any further, I do want to just share and provide that content warning where you know, we're going to be talking about bias and hate, and oftentimes you know, be using words or images that might be upsetting to some, and so just wanted to share that with all of you before we begin. A couple of just helpful guidelines. If you have questions, feel free to use the raised hand feature. I'm happy to, I know we'll be uploading these PowerPoints, but if you have any questions, I'll put my contact information at the end in the chat. So what I'm hoping for us to cover here today is first to distinguish what is the difference between a bias incident and a hate crime, because those are different. Second, to talk about some relevant statistics as it relates to hate crimes, not only on college campuses, but in the United States as well. Recognizing how hate groups can contribute to bias and hate, specifically on college campuses. So we'll be talking about some of the hate groups that we have out there. And then learn, you know, best ways that we as student affairs professionals, as housing and residence life professionals can prevent, but also respond to bias-related incidents or crimes that occur on our campuses. And then lastly, I'll be kind of just sharing some information about bias incident teams and reporting structures as well. So I wanted to just share a little bit. I know this is a very specific topic, and I wanted to share just a little bit about my relationship to this topic. When I was an undergraduate student at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, our college experienced an anti-LGBTQ targeted attack or hate crime on our campus. At that time, our LGBTQ coordinator had left a month prior, and I was currently the president of the student LGBTQ organization. And so what we did is we hosted a vigil in response to the crime that occurred on our campus. We had about 500 faculty, staff, and students come out to this vigil, which was a very large showing. The media got involved as well, you know, to say that a really intense crime occurred on a small private Quaker college makes a really great headline. And so a lot of the quotes that were shared from me when I was interviewed from our local news organizations were then shared online to national media organizations and outlets. And so what that did is, so this certainly was something that galvanized our campus. A few months later, our president offered to send myself and one of our hall directors to the Stop the Hate, Train the Trainer conference that's sponsored by Campus Pride, which is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I've attended that session twice, where you learn best practices on kind of a lot of what you'll be learning here today. And so that kind of sparked my interest in continuing to want to learn more about this topic on what we can do to create more inclusive spaces on our residential campuses. And so that also, I'm a doctoral student at University of West Georgia. I wanted to put this on there in case I see any wolves. I see some. Okay, awesome, love that.
Yesterday was my birthday, Rich.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes.
Go Wolves.
There you go. So I'm a doctoral candidate at West Georgia, and what I'm looking at specifically is the role of online reporting structures for LGBTQ students, and talking about the barriers with regard to campus climate, and what barriers are there for students to report or not report. So I start my dissertation work next year. So for this presentation, the way that it's structured here is we're going to start talking about the difference between bias incident hate crimes. Going to go into today's climate, talk about where the hate is coming from, prevention, response, and response strategies, bias team specifics, and then we're going to do some breakout room scenarios where I'm going to give you an incident that has occurred on a college campus, and y'all will work together to identify if it was a bias incident or hate crime, or what you might do on your campus to respond should that happen. All right. So to start us off, I want to talk about the difference between the two. So a bias or hate incident, as you can see here, is an act of conduct, speech, or expression to which a bias motive is evident as a contributing factor, regardless of whether or not the act itself was criminal. All right. As opposed to a hate crime, which is a hate incident that has risen to a level of crime. It has a criminal component. And we'll talk about a little bit the differences and the implications that come with this. Now, before we proceed, I don't want to make it seem as though a bias incident that might not have risen to a criminal level is any less impactful to a campus community. You know, sometimes the categorization of what it falls under is irrelevant in our role, right? Because there's hurt on our campus that we're responding to. But it does have some legal implications. So the FBI definition of what a hate crime is a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in part or in whole by a bias against, and here are the different protected classes here. So you'll see race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. So it's important to distinguish that hate itself is not a crime, though again, very hurtful and very impactful to a campus community. So I want us to use the chat feature for this. There's just a couple of quick questions that I'm gonna share with you. This is a low stakes, you weren't ready for a quiz this morning, I get it, but there's only just a couple of questions. So this is the first question, just kind of get us starting to talk about this topic. So in 2018, the most number of reported hate crimes were committed against individuals because of their what? Seeing a lot of A's, C, a couple C's, B's. I see a little bit of everything. Okay. Give you another couple seconds so we can kind of see where we stand here. I see A and B. Okay. So based on the information that we have, and again, I do this presentation, let me back up. I do this presentation to a lot of different groups, and I'm always excited to share this information with housing and residence life folks because you get it. When I say reported, right, reported crimes, I feel like you kind of know where we're going with this, right? These are crimes that are reported. There are a lot of crimes, right, and instances that go unreported. And so as you see the information again, and all the information that I gather is from the FBI statistics, and then I get some from the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Anti-Defamation League. But we all know, right? We all work in housing residence life. We know about the reported. So anyway, the correct answer for this one is C, race. So you'll see here, this is the breakdown again from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that categorizes the reported hate crimes from 2018. So you'll see race was the highest or most prevalent. And then you'll kind of see around the pie chart where sexual orientation and religion were tied for second. So question number 2. I think there's just 3 questions. The majority of hate crimes are committed that are committed in America are committed where? Or committed by who? A singular person, a group of people, or hate groups? And I saw a comment in the chat that said sometimes it's tough because it could be against multiple identities, and that's absolutely true. And what happens is it's classified as both. I see a lot of A's and some B's. All right. The answer is A, singular person, or what is referred to as lone wolves. And what we'll talk briefly about hate groups. Hate groups, the intention of the hate groups, they're not usually the ones committing the actual crimes themselves. They're the ones that are spreading this ideology or this message to try to inspire somebody to see through to these to their mission. And what they often do is they often target college age students. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the third question, in 2016, the most commonly reported type of hate crime was what? You think A, physical violence, B, vandalism of property, or C, verbal threats? All right, I'm seeing all kinds of different letters here. Okay. Take another couple seconds before I share the answer with all of you. See a lot of C's. It looks like C might have won that one. C's and A's. The correct answer is vandalism. And so destruction of property, right? I like to think of that as it's often a crime that can go unaccounted for, right? It's an opportunity crime where, it could be a swastika etched into a residence hall room door. It could be, a lot of it is destruction of property through vandalism. So that is the top reported, again, reported, right? And for that, and when I think about that too, is, that's something that we can see, that's something that we can take pictures of and is reportable. It does not take necessarily, if someone is the victim of a hate crime, to report it, other people can report it as well. So the last question I have is, the majority of hate crimes occur where? Do you think A, cities, like urban areas, B, residential communities, or C, in rural settings? Thank y'all so much for your engagement. I really appreciate y'all. I'm seeing a lot of everything. And so for this, our final question here, the answer is B, residential settings. And here's why we're talking about this here at SEAHO, about folks who work in residential communities on college and university campuses. So I wanted to highlight this really challenging statistic, which is the FBI estimates that over 1 million bias incidents occur on American college and university campuses each year. So that's something that directly impacts our work as folks who work in the residence halls where a lot of our students on campus are living. So the FBI tracks hate crimes, and again, reported, right? We want to be critical of the information that we're receiving. And so in 2014, and I'll show you these charts in a moment, almost 6,000 hate crime incidents were reported. However, both the FBI and the Southern Poverty Law Center both estimate that about 50,000 hate crimes occur each year in the United States. So again, it goes between what's happening versus, the whole picture versus what's being reported. And so here's a chart that tracks the trends of, again, through bias motivation over the last between 2004 and 2013. And so you'll see kind of the totals there. Again, race is the most prevalent form of bias motivation. And so I'll just give you a second to take a look at that. And so now I'll take it back even a little bit further back in history, between the years of 1997 and 2008. And so what always sticks out to me, right, events shape our lives. We've had a lot of recent events that have impacted bias incidents and hate crimes, not only on campus, but in the United States, as we all know, usually following a large incident, right? So if you see the red brackets under religion between the years of 2000 and 2001, thinking about the attacks on 9/11 and the amount of bias, right, that was committed between those 2 years as a result of that. We see spikes based on events that happen in our nation and in the world. And as college campuses are a microcosm of society, right? So again, as we see large events occurring, that has a lot of implications for us who live or work or live and work on campus. And so you'll notice in that first slide, right, that earlier on, gender and gender identity crimes were not tracked until the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act was passed in 2009 by Barack Obama. So now the FBI does track gender and gender identity, but in that last graph that I showed you, those were not accounted for. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about today's climate. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of activity occurs after events that galvanize our nation, our society. And so even directly following, not this most recent election, but the election of Donald Trump, we saw a rise in hate crimes. And so this is a statistic from the South Asian Americans Leading Together organization that also tracks different bias incidents and hate crimes here, talking about that rise between 2016 and 2017. And even just if we were to break it down just even more, between November 2016 here and November 2017, it talks about a total of 302 hate-related incidents, where 213 were violent in nature. And the FBI even reported a 5% increase between 2015 and 2016. Again, about a same level of increase after 9/11. And let's break it down even more. Let's go between November 8th and November 18th of 2016. 900 incidents. Many, as the Southern Poverty Law Center noted, happened on college and university campuses following that election. And then here are just a couple of the incidents that were specifically reported to SALT that they then shared. But of course, this is only just a small snapshot of a much larger, of many more that occurred. So I want to now transition a little bit into where is this hate coming from? So on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, one of their goals is to track hate groups across America, and they basically find out information about where there are active hate groups and what are they organizing about. And so currently, as it stands from earlier this week, and these numbers do fluctuate, 838 hate groups have been identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Of that, 19 are anti-immigrant in nature, 72 are anti-Muslim in nature, 63 neo-Nazis, 100 white nationalists, and 25 KKK, or the Ku Klux Klan. And then 36 would be identified as racist skinheads, and 65 were identified as anti-LGBT. So within our region, about the states that have the most hate groups, coming in first is Florida with 68, followed by Tennessee with 34, and Virginia close behind with 33. And so why does that matter? Again, thinking about, there have been many documented instances where hate groups have gone to college campuses for multiple reasons, whether it's to, sometimes they can protest if that's, within the policies of the institution. That's one way that they engage with campus communities. Another way is that they provide leaflets on cars and parking lots. Sometimes they'll do that overnight. They'll do drop boxes where they'll, share literature around campus and just drop them in front of like the student centers, in front of residence halls and things like that. So those are things to, again, kind of just watch out for, and to contact your campus security if you observe such things being dropped off on campus. And then a couple of things, right? So what we've seen in the last few years is that hate groups are trying to become a little bit more discreet in their really problematic and hateful ideologies. And so you don't necessarily see like the KKK, wearing robes as much anymore. A lot of times they do that at their like private ceremonies. They're trying to become more like the people, to again kind of reel people in to again their their organization. And so here are some symbols that that might not seem so hateful, but are really entrenched in real hate. So I know in the past couple of years we've probably seen the white power sign right there. That's in the top left corner. You'll see anything from the SS bolts, right? A lot of these come from neo-Nazi origins here, especially with the SS bolts, the life rune, the arrow cross. Stormfront down in the center at the bottom, that is a popular website that that students are typically directed to learn more about the hateful ideologies. And then you'll see some new ones like the anti-Antifa image, and then even the number 88. 8 is the 8th letter of the alphabet, 2 8s, HH, Hail Hitler. So a lot of them are very, very discreet. If you want to learn more, the link is at the bottom. The Anti-Defamation League has a whole like glossary that you can download if you want to learn more. A lot of them have to deal with numbers. So I don't want you to also think, if you see 88 on campus again, it could mean that, but it could have other meanings as well. So how to prevent and respond to bias and hate on campus. And a lot of this is in collaboration with other campus partners, of course. So I want to present 3 practical and, we work with campuses with not a lot of budget and free ways to prevent and respond to hate crimes on campus. So number 1, thinking about increasing visibility of student organizations. And so, I mean, of course, right, these 3 aren't going to be like life-changing, but these are things that I think we can put in the work to do. So thinking about, I think students know where we show up on campus and where we don't. So I think that's important for us to be visible with identity-based organizations on campus. And to show our support and to work to advocate and serve as allies to these different groups on campus. Next, continued trainings, right? So Campus Pride has a lot of different speakers that we can bring to campus for campus programming, campus-wide programming, RA programming, and things like that. And then, of course, train student staff. So thinking about your RA trainings in the fall. Maybe in sharing with some of them some of the images to look out for, to train them specifically on what to do if they see an act of vandalism that is biased, that has a biased motive to it. So training your staff, your student staff who are often on the front lines, who are witnessing some of these as well. So talking about some ways to respond. So first, hate crimes are statement crimes, right? They don't just impact, if I as a gay person am the direct target of a hate crime in my residence hall, yes, that's going to greatly impact me. But the power of hate crimes means that it impacts a whole community. So you're not just wanting to check in with the person who experienced the hate. I mean, of course, that's certainly that first step, but know that groups of people are affected as well. So to reach out to student organizations that might have the same identity and really work towards working with them to see what their needs are, because it could be very different. So again, we don't want to assume what their needs are in the aftermath of something happening on campus. So identifying their needs and not making assumptions, and then reporting progress to administration, which I'll talk about in a minute. Publicly denounce the hate. This is like the easiest thing to do, and campuses do such a poor job at it because they don't want to recognize the problem that's existing on their campus. But I can tell you, in just speaking with students following bias incidents on campus, this is what a lot of students that at least have reported to me of what they're looking for. A lot of times they know, we don't have security, footage in the residence hall. We don't know who did it, but boy, it would just be really nice to know that our campus administrators, our VP, our president, whoever, are publicly denouncing what happened and making the campus community aware. So again, working with administration as you can about that. I'm seeing something in the chat here. I've heard a lot of rhetoric about. Yeah, Jax, I agree. Thank you for sharing. That's a lot of that happens more than you might think, or more than we might think. So sending a notification of the crime to from campus community from your security office could also be a route. Here's something that happened from one of my previous institutions. There was a swastika that was etched into the front door of one of our residence halls. An RA reported to me at like 10:30 in the morning that day. I then shared that with our public safety director, who then got in contact with our director of diversity and inclusion and our vice president for student affairs, and those two co-authored this statement within an hour. So it doesn't take a lot to do this, to acknowledge that, basically saying this is what happened. This does not align with our values. Please let us know if you have any information. Please let us know how we can support, something like that. I'm not saying that this is the best example of that, but again, it's certainly better than silence, right? So so that's something that we can do. Inform local police as applicable. So again, contacting your security, and then they can coordinate with state or local police to receive additional assistance. And remember, if it is rises to a criminal level and it's considered a hate crime, you can also get additional support through the FBI. Okay, next is forming a bias incident team. So I would say, if you don't know if you have a bias incident team on your campus, I would encourage you to reach out and see. So bias incident team is typically made up of faculty, staff, and students. They meet throughout the year, specifically, usually after a incident is made aware, and they work towards working to repair that harm following these incidents. And so typically, so at my last institution, I was able to work to create a reporting structure here. And so we had the president of the Diversity Student Union, so the student organization on campus. They were a part of our group. We had a representative from our multicultural affairs program, myself, director. We had a Greek life heavy campus. We had the director of Greek life. We had a faculty member, and then we also had a vice president for diversity affairs as well make up that team. And so a couple questions that we considered is, did we want to create, there's going to be a form that we're going to review. Do we want to make that internal or external? Ultimately, we determined that it would be on the external website, so that even if there were visitors to campus, they could also fill out that form. The next thing that we considered was whether it would be anonymous or not. Research shows that if you provide space for it to be anonymous, while you might not get all the information, right? Thinking about incident reports that you hear and you can't fully always follow up, there's some things that you can't, you might not be able to know, but again, you're getting that information and you can again publicly denounce that act of hate on campus. So we chose anonymous as an option as well. And then something that we also considered is, what if a report What if somebody on the bias incident team was the one reported? So we had a structure for that as well. So again, something to consider. And so what we did to kind of combat that is that reports were not just sent to one person or two people, reports were sent to all members on the bias incident team. And so transitioning to the form, again, if you know you have a bias incident form, again, it's just really good to let your RAs know where to access it, or how does that play in relation to incident reports that they might be writing. So what we did is we structured ours through Maxient. We just created a new form. So again, we all received those submissions right, in live right when they submitted it. And we, again, allowed for anonymity, but, encouraged information. And on the report, we basically shared, if it is anonymous, just know that there are some limitations for us as we follow up, but you can always come forward later with more information. So we kind of created that opportunity. So here's the form. This is just a screen grab from Maxient. This is kind of like the who, what, where, why, when type of thing, where it has the location and numbers. Again, it's not mandatory for some of the fields except for the date and the location. Again, you can kind of talk about the involved parties, who was involved, who was affected. We asked, perceived nature of bias. You can check more than one. There's also an other that we share. And then, there's a drop down there. And then a couple of questions that we asked was list other individual or offices to which the incident has been reported. So in case it has been reported in other avenues, then we can collaborate with other offices. Please describe the incident, as much as possible. What person or groups do you think were affected by the incident? And then my favorite question that we ask is, what do you think an appropriate way for the bias incident team to respond would be? Because that's inviting that individual or individuals into that conversation about the response, and they can talk about who was harmed and what they think, what these reporting parties can, predict of what might be effective in our response. And then lastly, the supporting documents, again, thinking back to the most prevalent form of hate crime is vandalism, that can have a picture taken of that. So we do offer that. And then, of course, with Maxient, you're not a robot. It's just one of those things that you have to check at the end of every submission. So that's a little bit about our document that we created a few years ago. So there are a couple of real life scenarios that we're going to break out and do some breakout rooms. So there are 3 different scenarios, and Justin, I was wondering if you could help with this, or if that's something that I can do. I didn't know if it was pre-done already.
Creating breakout rooms, that hasn't been preset yet, but I can try to help you if you tell me how many you need.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry that didn't get over to you. So just 3 different groups. And so again, as Justin is working, and again, thank you, Justin, for all of your assistance today with getting you into different groups. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into the different groups, and I'm going to share with you a scenario. And again, your goal is to identify if you believe it's a bias incident or hate crime, and then discuss with other colleagues from our region about how you might, at your institution, respond to that incident.
Ryan, just let me know when you're ready to open them.
Okay, I think we're good. All right. And then I think there's a way that I can pop into these to share the question in the chat box.
There should be. So it looks like I might have to like assign you to a room and then pull you back.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll just assign you to the first room, and then there should be a way to like let me know when you want to come back or like leave the breakout room.
Okay, perfect.
I can assign you to another one. Okay. Did you get the invite for the next room?
Thank you again, Justin. I appreciate you.
Yeah. When I opened it, the number of rooms was already created, but nobody was assigned yet. So I was just like flying through putting people in.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I think in my thing I was like, it doesn't matter who you come, just randomly, whatever.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Well, it looks like they have probably like 7 minutes left or so in that room.
Okay, perfect. And then this ends at what, 11:05, right?
11.
15. Oh, at 11. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. I assigned him to a breakout room. He didn't just run away.
That was strange. So that was my hall director when I was an RA. That's wild. Oh my gosh. I don't think I've talked to him in like 10 years.
Small world.
Right? But how's everything? Are you at JMU?
I am, yeah.
Okay. How's everything going there?
About as well as can be expected.
Sure. I feel that. Larry?
Brian.
What in the world?
I said, I've seen this man's name. I have to know
My gosh.
what's going on, brother.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. I just saw a picture of your daughter on Instagram or something.
Yeah, man.
Beautiful.
Thank you, man. Just turned 2 a couple days ago. Yeah, yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah, man. How are you, man?
I'm great. I'm chilling. I'm at Mars Hill over in Western North Carolina.
Oh, you're in the mountains.
Yeah. So I went all over, but it was, yeah, it's been a wild ride. Are you still down in Florida?
Yeah, man. I'm at Florida State.
Florida State? Oh, what are you doing there?
Yeah, I just do like assessment work. So I'm on like the assessment team. Yeah.
Okay.
We just kind of do a lot of assessment work. So yeah, man. So I'm deep in that, man. At Florida State. So yeah.
Okay.
All is well, man. Good to see you, man.
So good to see you. Oh my
Oh, it's been like so long.
I was telling Justin, I was like, I saw you come up. I was like, that's like my supervisor from when I was at RA like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Back in the Benford days, man.
Yes, sir.
That's good. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Glad you're doing well. Well, I hate I came in super late, man. I just came from another meeting, but
Oh,
I want to stop in and speak, man, and say hello.
I appreciate you so much. It's so good to see you.
Absolutely, dude. Take care, man.
All right, you too. Maybe I'll see you in Asheville next year at next SEAHO.
Maybe, hopefully.
Okay. All right, I'll be here.
All right, sounds good.
Right. See ya.
Sorry, they also just sent us information on vaccines in Virginia because I guess higher ed staff and faculty are like the next group. So I'm filling out my form right now to get
Yeah, do it. I filled out mine like last week and they're gonna like call us, but they're not leaving voicemail. So it's like anytime we get a phone call, we're like, you know,
that is
the golden ticket, you know?
Yeah, really. It's like, all right, I gotta answer this one, but they're actually asking us for like our preferred communication method when we fill it out for Virginia. So I'm like, oh, that's nice.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's very nice. How long have you been at Mars Hill?
This is my first year.
Okay.
Yeah. And how long have you been at JMU?
This is my second year now.
Second year. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. My best friend was the strength coach for their football team. So
there you go.
Visit him and do all that.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hello, Justin. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good.
All right, so I think we're all back. So I wanted to just kind of briefly touch on the different scenarios that we had. So the first scenario, and I think it's in the chat, and I think that everyone probably has access to these scenarios. So Group 1, a campus newspaper accepts and prints advertisement from an off-campus extremist group proclaiming that the Holocaust never happened and that it is a falsehood concocted by Jews desiring public sympathy and government support from the Israeli cause. An upset Jewish student comes to your office and brings this to your attention. So, and again, these are all, these came from the Campus Pride training that I attended, and these were pulled from real life instances that occurred on American college and university campuses. So for anyone in the group A want to share what y'all talked about with regards to this scenario?
Okay. Wait, I became accidental spokesperson.
Thanks, Alex.
Rest of group A, chime in if I missed something. So we talked about immediately reaching out. Of course, don't wait, to Dean of Students Office, other campus partners. We also, Alyssa brought up a good point of this student reached out to you and like she works in housing and so do I. How can we offer that support in the like immediate future? Like go ahead, like in the immediate, go ahead and help that student in addition to like bring it to campus attention. We also talked a little bit about this is a printed newspaper. Are we allowed to recollect those? Getting general counsel involved of this isn't just university, but it's a advertisement, who approved it, what's going on, making sure we get whoever oversees these student newspaper folks involved. Anyone else, what I miss?
That's excellent. That's excellent, Alex. So did your group decide if they felt that it was a bias incident or hate crime?
I think we got to that at the very end. We were leaning towards hate crime, but Bernadette and the folks she's with were saying, well, we'd be interested to see what it actually looks like, what goes along with it, like how detailed, what exactly is it, to help us decide, I think.
Absolutely. There's always more information can be helpful in making that determination. But I would say if this is all the information that you're provided that we know of, that would be considered a bias incident because of freedom of speech, freedom of press. Again, doesn't mean that it has any less impact to a campus community. But again, for that one, I would be curious. I would have some follow-up questions as y'all highlighted about the staff and what who's allowed to like, are there policies about outside organizations getting room in the paper for advertisements and what policies are. So excellent. Group number 2. Have any takers for that?
So we had a case where someone keyed a prominent like queer student leader's car on campus and put like a derogatory term for queer people die, or it was the inverse. And so we talked about like making a campus statement, getting law enforcement involved, making sure that the student is feeling supported, like supporting the student, like other students who might be impacted by that. We also talked about whether, like how our response would impact the student if the student wasn't out. Like in this situation, the student was a prominent like student leader about LGBT issues, but considering that, like, you know, what our response would do to the impacted student and like what they would need from us in that respect. And anybody else who's in that group, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, Jack, that's amazing. It sounds like a lot of really great ideas for a response. And I really specifically liked what you shared about allowing that student who was impacted to be a part of that conversation about the response and involving them, right? Especially when we're talking about invisible identities and accidentally outing folks. Is something to consider. So this would be considered a hate crime, right? There's you have the bias motive, right, paired with the crime. And so again, that's an opportunity to get outside support, you know, like the FBI or other, you know, city police or whoever you think is appropriate to respond to that. And then the last group, Anyone from the last group want to share what y'all talked about in your scenario?
Real quick, Brian, can you tell us what the classification for that last situation was?
Yes, that last one was would be considered a hate crime based on the information provided.
I guess I could go for our group.
Okay, awesome.
So essentially, so we dealt with a group of male students who taunted a Muslim student wearing a hijab and took it, put it off her head, threw it in the trash. She fell and all that stuff. We ended up labeling it a hate crime. The reason why was because at the moment they could have got away with taunting, but at the moment that they actually put their hands on her, you know, and took her garment, then that caused her to, you know, chase him, and then she fell and everything, and then they threw it in the trash. So it could have got, if she reported it, essentially she could have got him on like assault for the simple fact that, you know, hands were laid on her, but then also, you know, destruction of property and everything. And so we just kind of talked about that and established that really quick, but then we kind of also talked about like different things that our universities do, but then even, you know, when it comes to like reporting, how might we make a student feel safe to report? But then, you know, even though we come up with these different things, how do we feed into their fear as well? Like, is there something that could potentially be there to where sometimes when we're trying to hold students accountable for the sake of like conduct, right? How many times do we kind of like hold hands during that too, and not make an example of a student? And therefore, you know, we tell the student that's the victim, oh, well, you know, we support you. But then over here on the other hand, it's just like, well, because of conduct, you know, we have to go through and, you know, and just kind of like walking with the students like, yeah, no, sometimes we don't make examples, you know, and that because of Robert brought a good point, like, you know, PR, different things that, and y'all could help me out if y'all, you know, feel the need to chime in, but just like how we try to like cater to different students or protect, you know, what the university, the overarching view is of the university in response and everything. And so sometimes we labeled the whole thing, just to reel it all in, I'm sorry, we labeled the whole thing a hate crime, but we talked about the different implications that kind of like go into it and even how we might feed into a student nervous from actually reporting. So yeah.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really great points and considerations, right? As you respond, and so I think for this one we would need more information. Again, I think it could go either way, but I think we would need to. So, was the motive because they you know, they grabbed the hijab, but can they prove, right? Can you prove that it was motivated because a distaste for that person's religion? I think a case could easily be made, but I think that again, a lot of this, as you can see, are nuanced, and we would need a lot more information. They're not always just cut and dry. So I realize that we are over, and I apologize, but I did not want to end without y'all having a chance to share. Thank you so much for coming out to this session. I really appreciate connecting with all of you. I dropped my email address in the chat box. So please feel free to reach out to me should you have any questions or want to talk about this further. I'd be happy to connect with you. But other than that, have a wonderful SEAHO, and looking forward to seeing y'all next year here in the mountains in Asheville, North Carolina.
Bye.